Hi everybody, I want to welcome you to Unite for Inclusion. My name is Melinda Jennison. I am so excited today to be able to talk to you about something that is really one of my greatest passions. I spend about 80% of my time with program and curriculum development. It is my passion. So I'm very excited today to be able to share some of the things that we've done in order to create more inclusive curriculums. Now, Pathways started quite a while ago in 2002, and most of our programs at that time were for children with disabilities. But our goals over time and our mission over time changed to become more inclusive. And what we wanted to do was to take children of all abilities and have them be a part of our program. That wasn't easy, particularly when we started out with 100% of the children having disabilities. So over time and about the last 5 years, I would say that we have now reached our goal, which was to make 65 to 70% of the children in our programs children without disabilities. We wanted to service children of all abilities and to ensure that all of them felt included and were able to progress and reach the fullest potential in our programs. Now that's a tall order. We had a lot of different children come in through those doors, and it was really difficult to be able to figure out what kind of a platform can we use that we can meet the needs of all of these different children. The first thing that we did, and I'll give you the 3 steps that we kind of use with every program that we develop. I may have someone who comes to me and they want to start a program. And the first thing that I say to them is, I want you to think about, and I'm totally for your program, but the first thing that you have to think about is, what are your overall goals? What's your umbrella? What does it look like? What do you want these children? We have classes that meet for 6-week increments. And so over that 6-week period of time, once a week, what are you going to teach? And how are you going to get to the overall goal of what you want these children to achieve by the time they get finished with this class? So they'll go away, they'll come back, and they'll come back with their goals. And there's usually about anywhere between 1 to 3 overall goals that they want to achieve. Then what we do is we use a process called backmapping. And I really encourage you to use this. It's just a really easy way to develop inclusive curriculums. You start with the end in mind. First of all, you start with that overall goal and objective, and then you take it and you break it down into those weekly increments or whatever your increments may be, and you break them down. And then what you do is for every single class, you think about what are your objectives for that class and what skill sets are those children going to have in order to meet those objectives. Then those objectives every week are building blocks that take the children up to where we want them to end up as far as the overall goals of the program. Now, backmapping is great. And I can't say enough about the fact that you can't show up unprepared. If you're going to run inclusive programs, you've got to be prepared, because you will have a child that will come in that will blow your mind away. And you've got to be prepared to be able to adjust that curriculum and to know what to do. So you can't just show up with, I want to teach electronics, or I want to coach, football, and just walk up onto the field or walk into the classroom with nothing prepared. You've got to be prepared, and you've got to be intentional about your goals, your objectives, and your skill sets about what you want to teach in every class. And again, we start with the end in mind. We start with that backmapping. What is that goal, and how are we going to break each class down to have its own objectives and skill sets in order to stepping stone those children up to the overall goal of the program? The second thing that we did was we started to learn that, backmapping, all of these plans that we had set and the roadmap that we developed for the program is never the roadmap that you end up using. We know that when we walk in, we have an infrastructure that we can use, but we also know, and one of the biggest mistakes we made in the first, when we started out, was to actually think that one roadmap would work for every child. It doesn't. And so what we had to do is, the second step we had to do was we had to learn to adapt our programs and learn to adapt our curriculums quickly. We had to walk in there prepared, not with just one roadmap, but with many different roadmaps, many different ideas. And so whenever I work with any of the teachers or the instructors, what we have to do is take now that roadmap that we built from backmapping, and we had to take the skill sets and the objectives and break them down sometimes in very small bite-sized pieces. And I liken it almost to a dot to dot that you do. You have the overall picture that you give to a child, and some children need, just a few dots to connect it in order to get the full picture. There are other children that are going to need a whole lot more dots, and their brain needs to develop a whole lot more connections before they can get to the next step. And so, what we had to do was think it in terms of how do we make this curriculum so adaptable that we had some dots on there, some bite-sized pieces that children would have to use that with a lot more dots. How could we create a flexible, adaptable curriculum? That was our second objective, is that we always sit down and think of numerous different ways that we can make this roadmap adaptable and flexible so that we can meet the needs of the majority of the children. Third step is to make the curriculum meaningful to the child. Make learning meaningful. And what I mean by that is we had a child who came up and wanted to develop a CAD 3D programming. Now, this was something I had never heard of. I didn't really know much about. And the child showed it to me. He had a great understanding of this. And I thought, man, this would be a great program for a lot of our kids. This is going to be, some kids are going to get really excited about this. They could make 3-dimensional cars. They could make, almost anything that they could imagine. They could actually make within this computer programming. And it was 3-dimensional. So he came up with all kinds of interesting ideas in order to do it. And one of the things was he developed, a design for each of the weeks in the 6-week program. So he had 6 designs, but they were his design. And I said to him, what happens if you have a child, that this might be good for a child who needs a little bit of a kickstart, like they need an idea, and then they can kind of run with the program. But what are you going to do with the child that doesn't want to mimic what you've made? In fact, it's kind of boring, and they don't like it, and they don't want to be constrained by your ideas. They want to expand and create and be on their own. What are you going to do for the kid that doesn't want to make a car? Let's say they want to make a unicorn. Can they take the same skill sets and your objectives within each of those classes and put those within their own designs so that basically every child ends up meeting the same overall goal, but they just do it in their own unique way? And so we changed his curriculum, came up with a bunch of ideas and just kind of overall things that children could do where they could choose to imitate his, or they could go off into making their own design. But the objectives and the goals and the things that were in the program and the skill sets were very much similar. So there's more than one way to meet your objectives. And the best way is to meet it in a way that's relevant and meaningful to a child. So think about in your curriculums, there are some children that might do better with writing. So help them to learn the curriculum by using writing as a medium to express themselves. Some kids may be better off at speaking. Some kids may learn better in small groups. Some kids may learn better using a computer and a PowerPoint and express their ideas more through that. They don't have to do anything one way. Look and listen to your children. What are they expressing? What are some of the gifts that you see within them? What are some of the ways that you could take some of the things that they love, that are meaningful to them, and be able to take that curriculum that you have, put all those skills and the goals and objectives kind of into and around that child, but let the child grow and flourish in the way where they're not following just your way to learn, but they're able to adapt and create some of their own ways to learn the goals and objectives that you have for them. I find the more relevant and the more meaningful we make the curriculum, the better the children learn and the more engaged they become. This becomes extremely helpful in the areas of inclusion, because if you have multiple ways that children can develop some of their own ways of learning and accessing the curriculum that you have and the goals and objectives they have, you will be amazed to see how quickly they will engage and learn the skills that you want them to learn. Now, up front, this type of engagement and this type of work and planning that goes into the curriculum is time consuming. There's no doubt. You have to sit down, you have to be intentional, you have to plan things out, you have to think about things. But the end result is that you're going to get more growth, you're going to get better engagement from your children and more learning. The other thing is after having put in the work, one of the great things about this that I've seen over time is our instructors now, they can almost make one roadmap, and they have become so good because they've done it so much and so often that they can adapt almost anything almost innately. They know exactly what has to be done, and they can make the accommodations and do what they need to do very quickly without almost any kind of help or having to get in as much detail. So again, that time investment is worth every dime that you invest into it and every minute that you invest into it, because in the long run, it will make it easier and it will make your classrooms more inclusive. Now, over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking more and more about some of the gold nuggets that we've learned in curriculum development that we're going to be sharing with you. And I ask you to go down and share in the comments below. What have you used? What are some of the steps that you've taken to build a more inclusive curriculum? That's what we're here for, is to unite for inclusion. We're here to find out what you've done, for you to share also the things that you've done that have helped to get every child included within your classroom. And I will tell you that almost all of the 3 steps that I've given you, to start with the end in mind, to come up with adaptable roadmaps, in order for people to achieve the goals, to be able to make learning more meaningful. All of these things, all of these 3 steps can be used in business. If you take a training module for an employee that you have and you put these 3 steps within it, you're going to be amazed at how well your employees and your staff and how much you can train kids. We have had employment training programs where we've used the same 3 steps within those programs to achieve our objectives in employment. So again, next week, we'll talk more about some of the gold nuggets and some of the ways that we have adapted the curriculums and helped individual children to achieve some of the objectives and to reach some of their passions and their potentials. So we'll see you next week. And remember, be adaptable with your curriculums. Plan them. Be intentional. And you're going to see the outcomes multiply.